This video will cover some of the basic functions of the Texas Instruments BA2+. The first thing after we turn our calculator on is that we can change the number of decimal points. It comes from the factory with 2 decimal points. And if we wanted to change that to 6, we would hit second, and then the decimal point, 6, enter. Note that enter and equals are not the same thing, right? Enter and equals are not the same thing. Enter, and you'll know that it stored it because you'll see 6 decimal points. And then we'll clear that selection. There are some basic mathematical operators that we can use. Just like most calculators, it's fairly straightforward, right? So if we wanted to do 6 plus 4, we would find that that is equal to 10, of course. But there are a few things on the calculator that may be unfamiliar to you, so we're going to cover those as well. The first thing is to look at how to raise something to a power. And so if we wanted to raise 3 to the 1.25 power, we could. The first thing we would do is hit 3, and then our yx, or our raise to an exponent button. Type in 1.25, and we'll find that it's 3.948222. And you'll note that that's a little different than the value that they show on the screen. If we were to change our number of decimal points back to 2 and go through that same process, you'll see that it does display a 3.95. So this is a good reminder to note that just because it shows 3.95, there are extra digits that are to the right of this. And so I'm going to go ahead and change my number of decimals back to 6. Another thing we can do is use parentheses to our advantage. And so here we have the example of 7 times the quantity of 3 plus 5. And so we could simply type in 7 times, we hit our left parenthesis, 3 plus 5. And when we hit this close parenthesis, we'll notice that it'll give us the amount of 3 plus 5. And then if we hit equals, it's going to be 7 times 8, and that is, of course, 56. If we use this function, we go back and we look at our previous example, right? So 1.25 is the same as 5 over 4, or 5 divided by 4. And so let's try that. Again, in order to clear it, we just simply click clear. So 3 yx, open parenthesis, 5 divided by 4, then our close parenthesis, and we see that we got the 1.25 again, and we'll hit equals in order to finish this out. And that's the same number that we had from before. It's also possible that if we wanted to find a percent of some number, this example we have $453 times 4, and we notice that this 4 stores in as the number 4, and as soon as we hit percent, it converts it to a decimal point. Then we'll hit equals, and that gives us a value of 18.12. And then the last function here that I want to show you is that we have this generate random number feature, where if we hit second and random, right, you'll notice that right above the dividing sign, we have RAND for random, and every time we hit that, it'll give us another random number between 0 and 1. And so if you wanted to flip a coin with someone, you could simply say, well, if it's above 0.5, I win, and it's below 0.5, I lose. The exponents are pretty straightforward as well. If we wanted to square something, right, so we have 8x squared, we simply hit the x squared button. If we wanted to find the square root of a number, we could type in 81 first, and then our square root. And if we wanted to find the reciprocal of 4, right, or raise 4 to the minus 1 power, we could simply hit our number 4, and then 1 over x. And we'll know that 1/4 is 0.25. The calculator also allows us to clear any mistakes that we may make, right? So we're going to walk through this process. Right? We're going to start by clearing out all of the numbers, and then we'll hit 3 times, and we're going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4.8 0.86. And then maybe you realize, well, no, that's supposed to be 1,234.56. So you can simply hit this arrow twice, then type in our 56, and then equals, and we'll find out that it's 3,703.68. Right? So our arrow will allow us to delete one of the entries or some of the entries that we've typed in. So if I wanted to raise something to a power, I could. Right? And we'll go through this process here where the first thing that we can do to clear out what is stored, we just type in 0 and then store and then the number. And if I wanted to raise something to the third power, right, there's a couple of ways I could do that. I could say 2yx3 equals, and that's 8. But if I was working with a more complex example and I wanted to use something other than 3, maybe 360, I could just type that number and store. In this case, I'll simply use 3. So we'll type in 3, store 7, and we'll know that that number is stored there. And now if I wanted to go through that same operation, 2yx recall 7, and you'll see that our 3 came up, and then equals, and of course we get 8. All right, so we can store and recall particular numbers from that memory. It's also possible that if we wanted to use this last answer feature, we could. So it will store the last answer if we ask it to. And so we could type in 3 plus 1 equals, and that's going to be 4. Type in a new calculation. If we want to raise 2 to the 4th power, we would type in 2yx, and now we can pull the answer portion from our calculator from the last operation we did. So we hit second and answer, and we'll notice that 4 populates, and then we type in equals, and 2 to the 4th power is 16. So we're going to go through a few examples and assume this first one I want to type in 1 plus 5% divided by 12. And what I can do is simply type in 1 plus, and then we'll use the parenthesis or the open parentheses function. Hit that parentheses, and it's going to be 5%, and we'll notice that it converts it to a decimal point, divided by 12, then a close parenthesis, and then equals, and we'll get 1.004167, right? So we can use those open and close parentheses in order to calculate some of these numbers. And now if we move on to the second example, 1 plus 0.05 divided by 12. Again, we can simply go to 1 plus, open parenthesis, 0.05 divided by 12, close parenthesis, equals. And we're going to raise that to the 12 times 30th power, right? So we have, again, our exponent function, y to the x. We're going to use an open parenthesis, 12 times 30. And when we close that, we know that that's going to be 360. And then when we type in equals, we'll see that that number is 4.467744. Now, since we've already done all of that math, if we wanted to, we could simply take that value, hit the reciprocal function, and this would be the value of that third example, 1 over the quantity of 1 plus 0.05 divided by 12 raised to the 12 times 30th power. And just to be sure, let's go through that operation as well. So 1 plus 0.05 divided by 12. We'll close that operation up with the close parenthesis, equals. We're going to raise that to the 12 times 30th power, which is 360. That's the value of our denominator, and we take the reciprocal of that, and that's the value of that whole quotient. Another way to think of this is to raise that exponent to a negative power. And so what we could do is go through that same operation, 1 plus. And we want to take 5%, right? Because 0.05 is the same as 5% divided by 12. And we're going to raise that to this quantity. And what we're going to use is 12, and we'll use this plus or minus button to make that a negative, times 30. And we'll know that that's negative 360, and then we'll find that we get that same value. The final thing which may be helpful is to know how to reset the calculator. Sometimes you'll be working through problems and it just seems as though you're not getting the right answer, and it's possible that maybe you changed a setting on the calculator. And if you change a setting on the calculator, maybe it's easier just to reset it. So on our BA2 Plus, there are two options. The first one is to hit second. And the plus or minus button, you'll notice that that's going to give us the reset function. And it's going to ask, do you want to reset it? And then you hit enter, and you'll notice that it's reset and it goes back to our 2 decimal points. Right? So if I wanted to change that number of decimal points again, I could go second, decimal point, 6, and enter. Enter and equals are not the same thing. And the other option is to flip the calculator over. You'll find a small pinhole on the back where you could use an open paper clip to reset it that way to perform a hard reset on the calculator. All of the information that we've used in the slides comes from the Texas Instruments website and the BA2 Plus guidebook or manual.